Hi, my name is Stephanie Ettleman, and I am here to present my final presentation for my permaculture design certificate through the Permaculture Women's Guild. Our site is located in Charlotte, Michigan, in the United States, and this site is being designed for my parents. And definitely a huge thank you to my mentor, Penny, who helped me to continue to move through the course. A little bit about me. I have a professional background in graphic design, community outreach, and have always been pretty passionate about environmentalism. So when I discovered permaculture, it felt like that thing that connected a lot of aspects of my life. It just made sense to me. I stumbled across it while deep in research about foraging for local foods and medicines. And at first, it seemed like something that would offer some sustainability to my family, especially as far as food goes. But the thing that I have appreciated the most about moving through this course was learning about how many different ways permaculture can actually affect our lives, and more importantly, can benefit the people and the species that are connected to us. So my goal upon completing the course is to help to share these experiences and the principles and design concepts with other people so that they can also be inspired and motivated to make changes themselves. I do want to note that for anyone who is still learning, who's viewing this presentation, I encourage you to pause the slideshow and read things through. I'm going to try not to read everything verbatim, and I'll just try to hit on the bullet points here to kind of keep the presentation a little bit shorter. The design thesis and vision statement for this site. So the most important part of this design is to create a property for a middle-aged couple that will allow them to grow their own food and do so in a comfortable fashion, both physically and financially. The second purpose is to give back to the surrounding ecosystem by providing food and shelter to wildlife in the area, which is mostly dominated by monocrop agricultural fields. The goals of this design are to divert water away from the foundation of the house and the barn and to utilize it in as many ways as possible before it's directed offsite. To plant and grow fruit, shrubs, and trees for canning. The couple enjoys canning and preserving foods, so we're hoping to design a perennial vegetable garden and polyculture beds and cold frames that can provide about 50% of their food during the growing season and 25% preserved foods in the winter. Another goal is to create food and habitat sources for local pollinators, birds, and other wildlife on a year-round basis. We're going to try to avoid gaps in the food sources using native plants and reducing the cost of birdseed. We would also like to reduce waste that is both leaving the site and coming onto it by utilizing all of the resources that the couple already has here on site, and to participate in more conscious consumer purchasing. Another goal is also to create a space of rest for this couple, not only just after busy work days, but also a space to reconnect with nature and themselves and each other after spending the last 5 or more years as caregivers while they've been living at the home of a parent. And the final goal would be to connect with community members and nurture a shared economy by growing seeds and being active and volunteering with the local seed share. During this course, my mom and I started that up at the local library. It's still in like the baby steps, but it's really exciting to kind of see how it's taking off. They are also going to be actively looking for or creating other sharing opportunities for fresh food, herbs, and swapping used items, both with neighbors and the community as a whole. Because this slideshow is also an educational tool for my parents, I wanted to include the guiding ethics and principles of this design. So of course we have like 3 basic ethics of permaculture, which is earth care, people care, and fair share or limits to consumption. And then we also have some of the design principles that are associated with permaculture. And I listed these ones in particular because I felt like they were the ones that I was really focusing on during the design. So I wanted to share some photos of my family's time at the site. We're kind of in a unique situation because we've been maintaining my parents' house and property for the last 5 years while they've been in a caretaking role at another location. Sometime within the next year, we will probably be finding a property of our own and my parents will be coming back here. Since we've been here, we've been implementing at a small scale some of the permaculture principles. And here are just some photos of our time here. So the site is located in Charlotte, Michigan, in the United States. This territory was originally Huron Potawatomi land. And the Charlotte community is a part of the watershed, not only to a lot of rivers and lakes in the region. You'll see the rivers I tried to highlight on the map below, but also we are a part of a watershed of the largest freshwater resource in the world, the Great Lakes. Within walking distance of home, there is a local farm store. There's a public wooded park, which is good for foraging some things and leisure activities. There is some resources within biking distance and also within driving distance that are noted. So here to the right-hand side is a base map from Google, and then the left-hand side is my drawn map of the site. It is on 1 acre. We are at zone 5A, and the average soil across the property is slightly acidic. Some things to note would be to the south of the property, we have the drain ditches that are next to the street that move a lot of water downhill to the east. So the west side of the land moves uphill, and there's probably 3 to 4 houses uphill, and a lot of water moves from there through the site into the road or the agricultural field to the east. Along the north side of the property, we have a pretty much unmaintained grass field, and just beyond that is another house. So here I have listed the zones of the property, and the zones are areas that we are physically in and using. They are listed from kind of like the use of most to least, where we tend to be. The photos on the left-hand side correlate with the numbers in order. In a perfect world, the things that need the most attention are going to be located in your earlier zones, 1 and 2, maybe 3, depending on what it is. And then the further out you go are going to be things that don't really need any maintenance. Our probably area here that is used the least would be in zone 5, and that is for us the drain field. Not much can be planted there, and we're hoping to move the play set over to that space for the grandkids when they're visiting in order to use that space in a better way. Okay, the sectors slide. So all of the things that move through the site, move my me there. So you can see that windrows. So things that move through the site. We have water, which is, as we discussed before, mostly moving through the site from the west to the east, minus a little spot to the north in the back. There is the wildlife and the bird paths noted pretty much coming from the field behind us or from the trees all around. The wind, you'll notice the windrows down here to the left corner. That is the annual average windrows, and most of the strong winds are coming from the west and the south. A few things to note: pesticides, herbicides, or chemicals dumped on the few properties above us on the hill can be moving through our property through the groundwater. Of course, traffic and pollutants and litter from both the roadsides on the south and the east edges of the property. There are some laws against planting in or manipulating the land within 30 feet of the middle of the road. Most of that is drain field, but it does go a little bit past that. Or not drain field, drain ditches, but it does go past that a bit. Of course, there are increasing risks of temperatures due to climate change, and we are getting more summer drought and more severe weather. And the larger risk there as far as severe weather goes would be tornadoes. And there is some social pressure from a neighbor across the road to maintain the property in a very particular fashion. So the resources on site. Should the couple choose to learn how to tap trees for syrup, there are 7 silver maple trees here. Those trees are pretty well known for shedding a lot of wood. So there are a lot of sticks, excess logs that can be used for soil building and for creating habitat, or ash and biochar. We have 2 fenced areas that are broken and will be coming down during one of the design phases, and that will be a resource for building other projects. There is a lot of water coming down from both the barn roof and the house roof. There's also various plants on site that can be used for food and medicine, and we have a lot of birds and insect species that can act as pest control. Because the couple both work at grocery outlets, they can help reduce some waste that is coming from those sites as well by utilizing excess cardboard for starting new beds and walkways. They do have access to clearance produce to help reduce the waste that would be thrown away. We have linked up with a local arborist who is very eco-conscious about the way that he is trimming trees and what trees he's removing, and he has offered free mulch to the site whenever we need it. Of course, the local seed share is a huge resource. Income from the jobs, canning and food preservation skills, and the couple is also interested in reinstalling their above ground pool once they come back to the site. And so we found some good information on how if you let the pool water evaporate for about 2 weeks, that removes all of the chlorine and other chemicals. And then that water can be used in the garden beds late in the year. Okay, so as you can see, this property is anything but flat. Shout out to my husband who helped me to put all of these flags in and run around with that A-frame, because this took us a while. However, I'm really grateful for this part of the course because we were able to identify some pretty major problems. The water that is moving downhill from the west, as well as broken gutters and some absent gutters, are sending a lot of water to the foundation of the house and somewhat to the foundation of the barn as well. The circles on the problems map also indicates where downspouts are emptying either into flower beds that are directly against the foundation, or they're not being emptied far enough out from the foundation. And all of this is collectively causing some water problems in the basement. So some solutions that I would like to see happen, I'm proposing 4 for the 4 areas that I think are the major contenders here. So alongside the driveway, what I would like to see is for us to sink, slow, and move the water down to the drain ditch instead of towards the house. So if we were to create some berms on contour and plant them with some native plants, that would help to slow and sink the water before it gets further onto the property. And then creating a French drain or a swale on the left side of the driveway to move it, to continue to move the water down the driveway instead of across the driveway, I think is key. We can also add that very last flower bed at the end of the driveway, at the end of the swale, as kind of like a last stop for the water before it leaves the site and goes into the drain ditch. Next, I would like to see water be redirected and captured off of the barn and garage. That space behind the barn, the couple it has had as an annual vegetable garden for a while, but what I would like to see is for us to create fish scale like swales and berms. Fish scale like berms with swales all on contour so that we can move the water from the barn and then down throughout the entire bed until it's finally redirected down to a white pine tree that's there and then eventually down to the young tulip tree that's been planted. The next 2 solutions that I would like to see. On the other side of the barn, it's kind of in a weird place as far as the land contour goes. And there's a lot of water right there on the right side of that barn, that right corner that just pools off of that and goes right down to the back of the house. So what I would like to see happen is some larger water encatchments like the ones that are pictured, and then redirecting the overflow across the driveway and down towards that French drain that we installed at the edge of the driveway. Lastly, there is an area out front, right off of the front porch, there is a sidewalk, and the water tends to move from the downspout that is circled there over to the sidewalk, and then straight across the sidewalk it pools. A really large pool of water will collect there, and I believe that is also moving into the foundation. So what I would love to see happen is to create these native plant beds out front, but with a layered effect so that we are creating rock walls on contour to slow the water down as it moves through the beds. So we would be directing the water from both the downspout and the end of the sidewalk there where it collects with some French drains or swales basically, and moving it into the beds. I'd also like to see between those swales in front of that sidewalk for all of the grass to be ripped up and for it to be planted with clover. So it's one more place that does not need any mowing maintenance. So here we have the components and connections. There are social connections up top, as well as all of the on-site connections. So these are all of the things that we incorporated into the design, and you'll see in my very messy lines that everything is connected to something else. The goal is to have things connected to other things in a number of ways. All right, edges and microclimates. So some things that I noticed upon observations. The locations that are highlighted in like the purple, the one back in the vegetable garden is just over the hill and also protected a little bit from the barn. And because of that, I believe that it has protection from the southwest harsh winter winds, and the deer will bed there from time to time during the winter. It might be a useful location to put some more delicate plants, of course, protected with some mulching. The other areas along the structures that are highlighted with that purple, these are all in areas that have stone foundations, which are going to warm a little bit more during the winter. And they're also protected from those southwest cold winter winds as well. So those would be ideal places for overwintering biennials, delicate plants, placing mini root cellar containers. Of course, they would all need insulating of or partial burial of some kind, but they would be good spaces to utilize. On the site, even all of the locations that are mostly shade and somewhat moist, they are all still greatly exposed to winds. And so in the heat of the summer, all of the soil pretty much dries out everywhere. We would like to remedy this by creating more compact hedges and better ground cover of plants. Here is our paths, patterns, and flows. The orange are our paths that we frequent the most. The purple is occasionally frequented, and the blue would be the rare ones, which we are normally taking for just occasional maintenance or just to wander the property and observe. The new design is going to be adding more pathways around the east side of the house to utilize that drain field area a bit more. Okay. So I won't read everything here, but the gist of it is, so plants, trees, and gardens. The current map that you'll see to the left, I have highlighted all of the current flower and some polyculture beds. What I am proposing in the new design is that we move a lot of these to more appropriate locations for the design, and also so that some of the plants are in more desirable locations, like for themselves. And then the couple may choose to eliminate some of those current beds in lieu of some of the new ones. I guess some areas that we can briefly touch on are the food forest. So that is in orange. A lot of the focus is on berries. So berries and like root veggies, I guess. So they can utilize those for canning and get the production quickly. There's also the vegetable garden that we will be anchoring the berms with perennial plants. And then we can mix in the annual plants in between. There's the orchard with some dwarf fruit trees so that they can get production sooner than later. The deck area, we want to create both some privacy around the deck and also some shade using trellis and vining plants and tall plants like sunflowers. The shaded hedge, the partially shaded hedge along the driveway, We are focusing on native plants for wildlife. We chose not to use edibles because it's unclear what the water quality is moving downhill, and the safest choice would be for us to not be consuming it. In the front bed, also a focus on native plants, maybe mixing in a few other things, but the goal is definitely pollinators and birds in that one as well. And around the southeast corner of the house, cold frames for those cold hardy fall and early winter vegetables. All right, the built environment. I keep trying to look for where I can put me there. So the new built environment is what I've done on this slide. All the areas that are the yellow number 1, we're looking at spaces with earthworks, which include swales, berms on contour, French drains, French drains to move water. So we're moving it away from foundations, we're moving it into beds, something of that nature, as well as a hugelkultur off contour. The number 2s, the blue number 2s, you'll note, that is where we will be installing water storage and redirecting overflow. There are 2 number 3s, which are 3-bin composts. There is the number 4, and on either side of that, we're looking at raised beds with a trellis. There is a number 5, which is going to be the cold frames, and both of those, the trellis, raised beds, and the cold frames are both going to be used. They're both going to be made using the reclaimed wood from the fences that we would be removing. Other things to note: installation of a clothesline to the northeast corner of the house. That is where the laundry room door is. It just makes good sense, and it gets a lot of sun there as well. As stated earlier, we're going to be moving the play set to the drain field to make room for one of those compost bins. I am proposing that they sell the old car and old motorhome that are no longer in use to raise funds for some of these projects. And as stated before, there's old fencing around the barn in an overgrown area, as well as an old dog fence that we will be removing to use the wood. Okay, social and invisible structures. So as far as the broader community goes, the couple is committed to helping to finish the establishment and to continue with maintaining the local seed share at the public library. They would like to assist in seed sorting and outreach, in the annual seed swap event, as well as committing to growing a handful of plants specifically for seed saving and contributing to the library. They would like to engage with that same group of people in the community by inviting them to the site to show them how seed saving is taking place here, and possibly run classes on seed saving, planting a seed garden, and starting seeds. As far as the neighbors go, they would like to allow nearby neighbors the opportunity to dump compost on site and exchange for soil during the growing seasons. And they will also be constructing a covered share table at the edge of the driveway near the road to share excess food, seeds, herbs, plants. They will have conversations with the neighbors and family and friends about hosting multi-family meals. Not only to share food, but also to expand their social connections with each other, maybe get to know each other a little bit better and foster some of those conversations around excess resources and skills and how do we help one another. Gifting resources from the site is something that they will be able to do during holidays and celebrations. Instead of purchasing things, they can gift things that are coming from directly on site, such as preserved foods, fresh foods, and other handmade items. Technology, transportation, and energy. So the couple has 2 gas-operated cars on site. They both work different shifts in different locations. One of them drives quite a distance, but she is dedicated to keeping an eye out for an opening that's closer to home so that she can reduce those expenses. Another way to reduce the expenses is to walk or bike to some of those local resources mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, public transportation in this area is very limited. It's a very rural community. There is 1 county bus, but it takes most of the day to utilize it. As retirement begins, some travel may take place, but the couple prefers to drive as opposed to travel by air, and retirement may also allow them to go down to a 1-car household. As far as the energy goes, the heat at this location is propane. And the last 12 months of heating was approximately $1,800. Unfortunately, we do get pretty heavy winters here, and ice storms are common. And during those ice storms, there are power outages. Because of this, the purchase of a clean burning pellet stove may be a good alternative heat source for emergencies, and also to possibly offset some of the cost of the propane with regular use. Electricity is provided by consumers. The website states that the company is on track to end its coal use by 2025, to use 90% clean energy sources, and to create price stability for customers, and to reach net zero carbon emissions. The residents are committed to exploring lifestyle changes and design to reduce the use of electricity. As far as technology goes, the couple does use a laptop and a tablet for internet use, a PlayStation and a TV for entertainment, as well as personal cell phones. They both agree to explore ways in which they can reduce the future number of electronics in the household with better consumer practices. All of their manual garden and yard tools, all of their yard tools are manual except for a gas-powered lawnmower and weed trimmer. The use of these things will reduce over time as lawn areas are reduced and seeded over with a no-mow mix. And they also plan to switch to electric mower and weed trimmer in the future. Animal waste and nutrient cycles. So here we have listed some things that are coming onto the site. A lot of those things can be used for, highlighted in the orange, for compost and soil building. Junk mail, newspaper, cardboard, scraps from food bought off-site, wood mulch from that local arborist. Straw bales for winterizing the home, like the foundation of the home, coming from a local farmer, and those can be planted in the following season. Waste that is on site would be some of those resources that we listed for soil building. I think I forgot to mention leaves earlier. There's a lot of those. And they also have 2 dogs. That pet waste can be composted for 1 to 2 years and then utilized under trees. Some of the waste leaving the site goes via a garbage service. There is also a recycle drop-off. They don't take a great variety of items, so there is a need here for learning to purchase items that are accepted at that recycle when it's an option, of course. And the goals around waste is to keep a priority on purchasing items that can be reused for dual purposes, such as upcycling into another use on site or for soil building. Finding resources for borrowing or renting items instead of purchasing will be key. And donating unneeded items to secondhand stores instead of throwing away, as well as purchasing from these stores when possible, will also help. Okay. Here. Okay, so phase 1. In the red box, I have highlighted the project that I think is the most important for my parents to start right away. I think is going to give them the most like bang for their buck, so to speak, and will hopefully motivate them to continue on with the design phases. So I will try to briefly run through these. So first, I would like to see them sell the old car and the motorhome and put that money towards getting the gutters installed on the barn. Directing the water from the barn and the house to appropriate locations. To get that vegetable garden up and running with the berms on contour and the swales and those perennials, as well as setting up some bird feeders throughout it. I would like to see them remove the fencing and save that wood for projects. Add a shade cloth to the mushroom bed that is up behind the barn. To cut back the overgrown kind of wild space back there by just a couple feet to allow for more appropriate maintenance around the vegetable garden. Digging the swale along the driveway to, again, continue to move that water away from the foundation right away. Move the playset over to the drain field, build the 3-bin compost for just general use over in zone 1. Install the clothesline. And indoors, I would like to see them set up the bucket system under the bathroom sinks for dumping, as well as set up an indoor seed starting station. I listed some plants to move from other places to the vegetable garden. And I'm also recommending that they consider making biochar with the excess wood to mix into those vegetable garden berms once they implement those. Okay, phase 2. In phase 2, I would like to see them pretty much completely do the food forest, mulch it, plant it, move the mushroom logs to an appropriate location, install rain and catchments on the corners of the barn and one in the house. I would like to see them mulch and plant along the driveway. Build the cold frames along the east side of the front porch. Build the raised beds with trellis along the sides of the deck, and to connect the two with some netting so that they can grow those vines up and over that really hot porch and they can get some shade there. To plant the privacy sunflower rows alongside the pool. To plant the orchard fruit trees with a slight berm and contour setup. Install bird and bat houses in the sheltered areas. Set up a second bird feeder and bird bath alongside the house. And begin to annually seed over the lawn with a no-mow mix. Again, I've listed some plants that I would like to recommend moving from some locations to the food forest, as well as to alongside the driveway that are already on the site. Phase 3. Here, I would like to see them build a hugelculture to expand the vegetable garden and to plant it with perennials. Build the roadside share table so they can start initiating that, that share economy with the nearby neighbors. To obtain an annual inspection from the arborist on the large maple tree in the front. There is one that he has already stated is starting to die, but maybe doesn't need to come down just yet, and he can trim it appropriately. My recommendation is to, at this phase, get an evaluation. If it is advised, I would recommend that they would cut it down, have it mulched on site, and keep the mulch to start these beds. And then, yeah, the next step is also to mulch that front bed and install those rock walls to slow the water down. To dig the swales and the French drains to start directing water into those beds. And then finally to plant the perennials in there. Indoors, I would like to see them start a worm bin at this phase, especially for use during the winter months so that they don't have to truck compost outside. Install that pellet stove, as well as build the 3-bin pet waste compost, which I think my face is covering there, off to the east side of the property. And then finally, I would like to see the peach tree guild implemented, which is to the west side of the house next to the driveway. Again, I've listed some plants that can be moved from other places into the locations I just discussed. All right, so here are the current species that I have observed on the site. Here is a list of the future species that I am proposing that we add to the site. Here is a components list of the components that I utilized within the design. The stakeholder interviews, we noted some of the things that the property owners had concerns about or a wish list. I think some important things to note were there isn't an allergy to lamb's quarters, which is a common plant found on this property. So that kind of has to be removed as soon as it's found. They did still have a desire to keep a good space for entertaining adult children and grandchildren when they come. The neighbor to the south, there's been a lot of hostile activity with him, with a verbally violent history. So an interview was not had with him. However, per some of those conversations, we already know that he would like a well-manicured lawn with no diversity. Hopefully, overseeding that lawn with that no-mow mix will help it have a more uniform, shorter look eventually. At the very least, we can definitely address his concern in the fall. He does not appreciate the leaves landing in the drain ditches. And so making sure that we are moving those autumn leaves from the yard and into the beds surrounding the trees is really going to help to avoid conflict during that time with him. The neighbor to the west of the site is an elderly woman. She lives alone. She said that all she asks for is an ear from time to time and assistance in emergency situations. The couple has agreed to reach out to include her in invitations to meals and sharing surplus foods. Personal boundaries assessment for my parents. With one having worsening arthritis in the hands and the other increasing issues in the low back, the tasks and expectations may need to be reduced or altered to prevent overuse of these areas. They will need to accept help from others. They will have access to me, their daughter, or the designer, for any project that feels overwhelming or like it needs more support. The emotional boundaries, they need to be conscious about making sure that they still have time to rest. Being realistic about how much can be maintained and how it's going to be maintained and what is like a want versus a need. The financial boundaries of the couple, they wish to keep items or projects as cheap as possible. Their hope is to keep the whole process or the whole design at no more than $25 to $50 per month of investment. And that may mean that they need to save for a little bit before implementing the next step at any moment in the design. Time and energy. Until they move into retirement, of course, they will have limited time. So making sure that we are setting the design up for low maintenance is going to be key. The couple will be learning as they go. So I have supplied them with some online resources and some book recommendations to encourage further reading and research for self-education, but of course they're going to have access to the designer at any time. And the socioeconomic boundaries for the site, it's not actually legal here to utilize a gray water system. And the most simple workaround for this is to use the bucket system under some of the sinks to then be dumped out into some beds. There's also laws that prevent any planting or manipulation of the drain ditches alongside the road. Here I have a breakdown of the implementation timeline and task lists. Some extra notes to consider that I didn't include in the list are when the mushroom log production reduces, they need to begin sourcing new logs for inoculation the following March or April of those new logs. And we talked about the possibility of cutting down the maple tree, which could come at an odd time, not necessarily in a particular phase. Here I have the maintenance plan. This is a layout from month to month in any given year. It kind of lays out the maintenance plan of the flower beds or the vegetable beds, and does note a few other property maintenance things. The ongoing ones that you might note are chop and drop of appropriate plants, collection of seeds, turning the compost occasionally, and keeping that bucket of compost and soil with the cover crop to scatter to keep weeds away in the beds would all be good things to just kind of do on an ongoing basis. So other notes to consider. So in particular for the seed library, we're going to want to make sure that we're planning for a winter seed share gathering to sort seed donations and to reach out to members to see where we are with stocking the seed library and preparing for the large community seed swap in the late winter. Annually spreading the no-mode seed mix. And one of the most important things is to remember that no design is ever complete, and there is a constant need for monitoring and making changes and revisiting things to determine what is and isn't working. Here I have listed some resources for my parents to check out to continue learning and to assist them in the implementation. And observation and site assessment notes. So here's some photos from when I was doing observations for the design. As a designer, I wanted to note that this is my first time doing this for someone. I found it challenging to not want to push my parents to push their comfort zone, right? Like this design was not for me, it was for them. And there may have been an area where I felt like more could be done, but it wasn't in their comfort zone, and that's okay. I feel like I do that in my personal life anyways. So I think as a designer, I will always have to be reminding myself in my own design, as well as when I'm working with others, to be honest about limitations and boundaries, because no design is going to be successful if it doesn't work for the people who actually have to utilize it. I did find respite in providing extra information for my parents so that they can learn about it on their own. And maybe in the future, they could make the decision to implement those if they choose. There's nothing wrong with sharing more info. So I guess with that, thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, and hopefully some folks who watched it learned something, and I'm really excited to see this come to fruition. Thanks.